Forget everything you have ever heard about noble Native Americans, free warriors, wise shamans, and harmony with nature. There is no place for romance or heroism in this story. Here you will find a world where every day is a struggle to survive in mud, cold, and fear. There are no miracles, no fairy tales, and even hope is a luxury no one can afford. Death is an everyday occurrence, pain is a habit, and the future is an empty word. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who has joined us. Now, get comfortable. Let's begin. You open your eyes to another gray dawn, blinking away the heavy, damp darkness that clings to every surface. The world is silent, but it is not a comforting silence. Rather, it is the thick, uneasy quiet of a morning that promises nothing but another endless day. Your sleep has been as restless as a river in flood season, constantly interrupted by the growling of your own stomach and the creeping suspicion that something or someone might be lurking just outside the fragile barrier of sticks and hide you call a wall. You try to sit up, feeling your joints protest, aching from the hard packed earth that serves as your bed. The chill has seeped into your bones, and the only thing that keeps you from shivering is the layer of grime and smoke that has built up on your skin over months, perhaps years, of living like this. The hut smells of old fire, burnt wood, and the faint, ever present scent of mildew, as if even the air is tired. Above your head, the thin, patched roof leaks a slow, steady drip of water onto the dirt, a reminder that the world outside cares nothing for your comfort. The fire in the pit, which last night offered at least the illusion of warmth, is now only a memory, a blackened patch of coals and ash, smoldering with the faintest hint of heat. You consider trying to rekindle it, but your fingers are stiff, and besides, the wood you have left is damp and will smoke more than it will burn. As you stretch your legs, you realize your only blanket, a ragged, moth-eaten animal hide, has slipped to the floor. It is already clammy with cold. You drape it over your shoulders anyway, because there is no choice. In this world, comfort is not something you can choose. It is something that happens by accident, if at all. Your stomach grumbles, louder this time, and you try to remember the last time you ate something other than roots and stale leftover scraps. The answer is not encouraging. You survive the night, yes, but survival is a low bar. You begin to wonder, as you have wondered every morning for as long as you can remember, why you bother to keep waking up at all. The thought passes quickly, chased away by routine. Living, for you, is just another job. Somewhere outside, you hear the faint sounds of movement, maybe another soul braving the morning cold, or perhaps an animal searching for its own miserable breakfast. The sky beyond the cracks in your wall is a flat, iron gray, promising rain or sleet or something worse. You sigh. It hardly matters. The weather is never kind, but then neither is anything else. There is no luxury in your life, and certainly no hope of it. Even as a so called seer, a person with the supposed power to divine the future, you have little power over the daily realities that grind everyone around you down to dust. The people come to you for answers, for hope, for reassurance that things might, just possibly, improve. You have learned to tell them what they want to hear, but you have not learned to believe it yourself. You look around your hut, if one can call it that. The floor is a mixture of hard packed clay and rotting leaves. The roof is a patchwork of hides so thin the wind whistles through at night. And the only possessions you have are a bundle of bones for casting, a knife too dull to cut, and a bowl carved from a cracked gourd. In the farthest corner, the remains of last night's feast, a few gnawed bones, and a puddle of cold, greasy water speak to the constant hunger that defines your existence. You rise, every muscle complaining, and pull yourself together. You must prepare for the day, because if you do not, the day will not hesitate to destroy you. This is the first lesson you ever learned. Survival is not guaranteed, and the world does not care if you live or die. You step outside into the raw, gray morning, the cold biting at your face. The earth is wet, the air is thick with the promise of more rain, and everywhere you look, you see nothing but mud, smoke, and the gaunt faces of people just as tired as you. You are the seer, the one who is supposed to know what comes next. But as you look up at the sky, you know the truth. There is nothing to see and nothing to hope for. You start another day. You always wake up hungry, but the feeling no longer surprises you. Hunger is as much a part of your life as the air you breathe or the dirt you sleep on. You sit on the cold ground, bones creaking, and you try to ignore your stomach's complaints. But ignoring does not fill it. Your mind, ever so practical, immediately turns to the endless calculations. What scraps remain? What roots might still be undug? What animals might have been foolish enough to wander near during the night? You poke through the meager remains of yesterday's gathering, a handful of dried berries, several limp roots, and a piece of meat so hard and shriveled it could probably serve as a weapon. The taste, if you dare to chew it, is a blend of old smoke and forgotten hopes. You gnaw on it anyway, because dignity has no place in your hut, nor in anyone else's for that matter. Here, pride is a story you tell children so they do not give up before their first winter. It is not just your own hunger you have to manage. Already, as the dawn reluctantly drags itself across the camp, people drift past your doorway, eyes half closed, faces pinched and gray. Some carry children, limp and silent, wrapped in whatever cloth they can spare. Others carry baskets or worn leather pouches, hopeful for something, anything, to take home. The ones who still pretend to believe in your powers often leave offerings at your door: a cracked shell, a bone carved with a symbol, a bird's feather. None of this is edible, but you accept it all because the ritual is important to them, and sometimes you are rewarded with a half-rotten apple or a heel of bread. You try not to resent the ones who bring nothing, but it is difficult. You know they are just as desperate as you are, just as hollow, just as tired. Their faces are all the same, gaunt, eyes ringed with the bruises of sleepless nights, cheeks sunken from too many missed meals. You tell yourself you are not responsible for their misery, but your own words sound hollow. You remember the days when you could sometimes catch a rabbit or find a patch of berries before the birds did. Now, the animals seem to know better, and the land itself fights you for every mouthful. The soil, once dark and rich, is now a stubborn, thin blanket over stone. Sometimes you dream of lush fields, rivers overflowing with fish, fat deer that walk right into your traps. Then you wake up and laugh bitterly at your own foolishness. Dreaming is for those who do not know better. Today, like every day, the hunt for food will consume every ounce of energy you have left. You dig through the earth, your fingers numb and raw, pulling out bitter roots and tiny bulbs. You search the banks of the sluggish stream for frogs or edible weeds, but usually you find only mud and disappointment. You check the snares you set last night, hoping against hope, but more often than not, the traps are empty, or worse, sprung by something cleverer than you, leaving behind nothing but mockery. You try to remember the last real meal you ate, but the memory is lost beneath the weight of 1,000 disappointing mornings. Once you had a taste of roasted bison, the meat so rich and fatty you felt dizzy after only a few bites. That was years ago, and you suspect you will never taste anything like it again. Sometimes, when the wind is right, you catch the scent of something cooking in another part of the camp, maybe someone luckier, maybe just more ruthless. The smell makes your mouth water, and you hate yourself a little for it. You are not alone in your suffering. Everywhere you look, others are making the same desperate calculations, the same miserable rounds. You see a woman chewing on tree bark, her teeth stained brown. A boy tries to catch insects in a woven basket. An old man gnaws on a bone so thoroughly that even the marrow is gone. The children are quieter these days, their play slowed by exhaustion. Some of them cry, but not as often as they used to. Hunger teaches silence faster than any elder ever could. There are no feasts here, no celebrations. When someone catches a fish or finds a clutch of bird eggs, it is not a communal affair. The lucky hoard their winnings, fearful of being seen, knowing that generosity is a luxury no one can afford. You do not blame them. If you found a rabbit, you would probably do the same. As the sun climbs higher, you know you must conserve what little you have. You nibble on a piece of root, chewing it until your jaw aches, swallowing with difficulty. Your stomach groans in protest, but you tell it to be patient. There is always tomorrow, and tomorrow always arrives empty handed. Despite everything, you must prepare yourself for your real work. The ritual, the performance, the pretense of wisdom that others expect from you. Soon people will come to you with questions. When will the next deer appear? Will it rain? Will the children survive the winter? You will roll your bones and whisper nonsense because it is what they need. Perhaps, if the spirits are kind, someone will thank you with something edible. If not, there is always the comfort of routine. As the day drags on, your hunger never quite leaves, never quite becomes bearable. It is always there, gnawing at you, reminding you that survival is a matter of luck, not skill or faith. You wonder how many more mornings you will wake up like this, and you suspect the answer is, unfortunately, many. Another day of hunger, another day of being alive. That is the best anyone here can hope for. You are not sure when dirt became less of an inconvenience and more of a companion. It is everywhere, caked under your fingernails, streaked across your face, gritted into your teeth, ground into the very fabric of what passes for your clothes. No matter how many times you try to brush it away, the earth simply laughs and clings tighter. You have long since given up the fantasy of cleanliness. That was for a different world, a softer life. Here, dirt is a fact, as reliable as hunger and disappointment. Even your most treasured possession, the animal hide you use for divining, decorated with old symbols and faded paints, smells unmistakably of sweat and smoke, of things long dead and not entirely buried. The air in your hut is thick with it, a perpetual fog of burnt wood and stale living. You do not bother to open the flap to let in fresh air. There is none. Every breath tastes of old fires, failed meals, and a hint of mildew, as if the world itself is slowly rotting. You catch your reflection sometimes in a puddle after the rain and almost do not recognize yourself. The person who stares back is smeared with old ash, their hair wild, their eyes tired. The only constant is the dirt. It is beneath your skin now, settling into every line and crease, making you older than you are. Sometimes you joke, if you could find anyone who still cared to laugh, that you are more mud than man. Clothing is a daily exercise in disappointment. You wear what you have, and what you have is little. Once, perhaps your tunic was soft and well made, but now it is a patchwork of repairs. Animal hide here, plant fiber there, all of it stained with the long history of days spent crawling through the underbrush or kneeling at smoky fires. You tie bits of sinew to hold it together. The seams itch, and sometimes they split open anyway, but you are used to the feeling. The cold, when it comes, sneaks in through the holes, but you tell yourself it is better than nothing. Most things are better than nothing. Outside your hut, the mud is thick and sucking. Each step is a risk. Lose a shoe, if you are lucky enough to have one. Step on something sharp, or simply sink and have to be hauled out by someone else. No one ever laughs at these mishaps. You all know that the mud is patient, waiting for the careless and the tired, waiting for a misstep. Sometimes the children disappear for hours, their play leaving trails of dirty footprints everywhere. Sometimes someone does not come back. You do not ask questions. The smoke is another constant, though less forgiving. It stains everything, your clothes, your skin, the inside of your nose. It makes your eyes water, your lungs burn. When the wind is wrong, the entire camp seems to sit in a fog, everyone coughing and cursing, but unwilling to let their fires go out. Fire is too precious to risk. You take the smoke, the tears, the raw throats, because the alternative is worse. You wonder if the spirits are impressed by how much pain you will tolerate just to avoid freezing to death. Even the tools you use for divining are filthy. The bones are stained brown from use, the carved stones blackened by years of exposure to smoke and handling. Sometimes someone asks why you do not clean them. You shrug. Why bother? Dirt has its own kind of truth. The universe is indifferent, and so are you. Sometimes you think back to stories of the old days, when the earth was generous and the rivers clean, when the people wore bright colors and beads, when a bath in the river was something to look forward to rather than a dangerous luxury. Now you avoid the river whenever possible. Its banks are choked with mud, the water always cold, and always moving too fast or not at all. You know what lurks beneath the surface: leeches, sharp stones, and sometimes the bloated body of a fish or something less pleasant. On rare occasions, rain will wash some of the dirt away, but only for a moment. The clean feeling is as fleeting as laughter or hope, quickly replaced by the next layer of mud or the next meal cooked over a smoky fire. You accept it because acceptance is easier than fighting. You have seen others rail against the filth, try to clean their hands before meals, insist on changing their clothes, but they always lose. The earth always wins. At night, you settle down into the same dirt you woke up on. You wrap yourself in your threadbare hide and listen to the wind rattling the walls. Sometimes you can taste the earth in your dreams, feel the soot in your lungs even as you sleep. You wake up the same as you went to bed, dirty, tired, and unchanged. You think perhaps you would miss the dirt if it were gone. You suspect you would not know yourself without it. This is your life, a daily truce with filth, an endless campaign against the mud, a slow surrender to the knowledge that nothing ever really gets clean. You are part of the earth now, as much as it is part of you. There is no such thing as privacy in this world, only the illusion of solitude briefly snatched between the endless comings and goings of people desperate for answers you cannot give. Every day, long before you are ready, someone will push aside the hide at your doorway, squint at you through the gloom, and whisper questions as if your hut itself is holy ground rather than a heap of mud and misery. They do not ask about happiness. No one has use for happiness. Their needs are always the same. Will the weather kill us? Will the next hunt fail? Will my child survive this cough that never ends? They want reassurance, but more than that, they want a reason, any reason, for the endless stream of small disasters that define their lives. You, the so called seer, are expected to conjure meaning from bone and ash, to turn the randomness of suffering into a pattern that makes their misery feel less accidental. You sit in the dirt, legs crossed, shivering because you always shiver, and pretend that the world is as full of mystery as they wish it to be. The bones you throw are just bones, rabbit, or bird. Sometimes even fish if you are truly out of luck. They are no more magical than the rocks in the path, no wiser than the mud stuck to your feet. Still, you have learned to mutter the right words, to squint and frown, and let silence linger just long enough for their imaginations to fill in the gaps. You give them what they want, which is almost never the truth. Sometimes the questions are petty. Will the woman next door steal my firewood? Is my husband sleeping with that skinny widow? Should I plant the seeds now or wait for rain? You invent answers because honesty is a currency no one can afford. In return, you get gifts, a feather, a smooth stone, the promise of help that never materializes. You take what you are given because it is easier than explaining the futility of it all. They come to you at night too, when the wind howls and the fires burn low, faces painted by fear and shadows. Some want protection from spirits, others from the neighbors they have wronged. You mix ashes with spit, draw symbols on the ground, and tell them to sleep with a stone under their pillow. The ritual is what matters, not the result. You have learned that fear is easier to manage when it has a name, a shape, an enemy to blame. You would like to believe sometimes that you have power, that your words can hold back the flood, keep a child from dying, drive away a rival tribe. But you know better. The only true power you possess is the ability to soothe, to distract, to keep everyone busy while the inevitable happens. Sometimes your predictions come true, not because you are wise, but because misery is so common here that even a random guess will look like foresight. The people are tired, and so are you. They come in endless waves, clutching their talismans, wearing necklaces of teeth or wristlets of sinew, always searching for some charm, some sign that the spirits notice them at all. You see it in their eyes, the hope, the desperation, the private terror that this is all there is and all there ever will be. You wish you could tell them the truth, that there is no plan, no pattern, no God with a ledger tracking their suffering. But you have tried honesty before, and it was met with silence, suspicion, and eventually anger. Lies, at least, have the decency to comfort. Superstition is the glue that holds your people together. Every cough is a curse, every storm a punishment, every small victory a sign that the ancestors are briefly smiling. If a child dies, it is because someone failed a ritual, or forgot to leave an offering, or said the wrong thing at the wrong time. No one wants to admit that sometimes children just die, that life is nothing but accident, wrapped in dirt and soot and wishful thinking. You see mothers cutting their hair in grief, fathers burying tiny tokens in the ground, elders whispering songs to the wind. You help them because it gives you something to do and because you know it is better than the alternative. When people have nothing left, they turn on each other. You have seen it happen before. A bad harvest blamed on a neighbor, a fever pinned to a stranger, a sudden death explained away by the envy of an old woman. Superstition is protection. It is also a weapon. There are days when you wonder if you believe in any of it. If your hands, always stained with smoke and soil, really do hold a fragment of power. You have had dreams, strange, feverish dreams, where animals talk and shadows dance. Sometimes you think you see patterns in the rising smoke, hear whispers in the rustle of leaves. But when you wake, you are always in the same hut, surrounded by the same questions, the same hungry faces. You know better than to mistake longing for prophecy. You make yourself useful because usefulness is survival. You feed their superstitions, stoke their fears, promise that tomorrow will be easier if only they do as you say. And when tomorrow arose and nothing has changed, you offer another story. No one is fooled, but everyone pretends. This is your place, the keeper of small comforts, the architect of lies. In a world where nothing is certain, certainty is the most valuable thing you can sell. And so you do, day after day, until even you begin to believe the stories you tell. You pretend to be a master of secrets, but some truths need no bones or omens to reveal themselves. Danger, here, is not subtle. It seeps out of the forest on misty mornings and returns at dusk, a constant presence gnawing at the edges of your world. The trees loom at the border of your camp, ancient and unfeeling, their twisted trunks crowding together as if to block out any hope of safety. The people you live among are not the only ones ruled by hunger, fear, and desperation. In the forest, everything is hungry and everything is hunting. Each day begins with the same silent tally: who is still here and who is not. You have learned to count quickly without drawing attention. Absence is a wound you do not pick at in public. Sometimes a child slips away while gathering wood or berries, never to return. Sometimes a seasoned hunter vanishes on what should have been an ordinary morning, the only trace a snapped snare or a smear of blood on the leaves. No one asks too many questions. You all know the answers. The forest is not the cartoon wilderness of old stories, with kindly animals and edible roots at every turn. Here, even the trees seem to resent your existence, their roots waiting to trip you, their branches ready to scratch your face or tangle in your hair. The paths you walk are never the same from one day to the next. You mark your way with broken twigs and stones, but the forest swallows your signs in a matter of hours. Sometimes you suspect the land itself is tired of you and wishes you would simply go away. You have memorized every sound the forest makes: the sharp bark of a fox, the sudden hush when a predator moves nearby, the shrill warning of birds that have seen something you have not. Your heart pounds at every crackle of underbrush, every shadow that moves in the corner of your eye. You walk with your head down, alert for tracks that end too soon or strange mar gouged in the bark of trees. You know which animals to fear: wolves, bears, wild cats. But you also know the deadliest things in the woods walk on two legs. Rival tribes are the ghosts of every night. You tell stories about them to frighten children into staying close to camp. But it is not just a tale. There are scars on your own arms, reminders of what happens when someone steps across a line they did not see. You sleep lightly, listening for shouts or the dull thud of running feet. Some nights, the wind carries the distant sound of singing or drumming that is not your own. Those are the nights when the fires burn low and every family keeps their weapons close at hand. You know, without needing bones or smoke, that the world beyond your circle of light is always waiting to take something from you. Sometimes you wonder if you are more afraid of animals or people. Animals will kill for hunger or fear, but people will kill for reasons you cannot understand. Revenge, envy, boredom. You have seen what happens after a raid. The silence in the morning, the wreckage left behind, the names you do not speak aloud. You know better than to ask for justice. Here, justice is a circle. Today's victim is tomorrow's attacker. No one forgets, and no one forgives. Even the smallest things are a threat. Poisonous plants that look like food, insects that carry disease, water that tastes sweet but makes you sick. The world is full of lessons, and you have learned every one of them the hard way. You teach the children, the ones who live long enough to learn, to never put a hand into a hole or mouth to a berry unless you have shown them first. Still, accidents happen. The forest does not care if you are careful. It is not just what lives in the forest that you fear, but what dies there. Sometimes you find bones picked clean and scattered, reminders that every living thing here is on borrowed time. Sometimes there are offerings left by other hands, charms and totems meant to appease angry spirits, feathers strung on cord, stains that might be blood, or just the iron rich mud. You are supposed to know what they mean. Mostly, you pretend. There are moments when the forest is almost beautiful, shafts of sunlight through the leaves, the brief explosion of flowers in spring, the silent, endless snow in winter. But even these things are dangerous. Too much beauty is a sign of something hiding or something about to die. You learn not to trust it. The only safety you have is the small circle of firelight, the thin barrier of smoke and noise that keeps the world at bay for a few hours. Still, you go into the forest because you have no choice. Everything you need, food, firewood, medicine, waits beyond the camp, guarded by teeth and claws and malice. Every trip is a risk you pretend not to notice. You tie your lucky charm around your neck, mumble the words you think are right, and step into the gloom. You do not look back. No one ever does. You come home, if you are lucky, with your hands full and your heart pounding. You tell yourself that next time it will be easier. You know that is a lie. The dangers in the forest are patient. They have all the time in the world. You like to imagine, sometimes, that pain is a visitor you can send away with a word or a ritual, that illness is just another spirit to be bribed or frightened off. That is what people expect from you, the seer, the knower of secrets, the one who can talk to things that cannot be seen. But you know the truth better than anyone. Pain does not listen, and disease never leaves. It settles in like a relative with nowhere else to go, making itself comfortable in your body, in your hut, in every breath you take. You have seen every kind of wound and sickness this world has to offer. Scrapes that become festering sores, broken bones that never set right, fevers that burn through the camp like wildfire, leaving only silence behind. It is a rare year when everyone survives winter. Even the healthy are only healthy for now. Everyone here lives on borrowed time, and the debt collectors are not picky about who they visit. Injury is as routine as eating, and you have long since stopped being surprised by the things people do to themselves in the name of survival. A child climbs a tree for a bird's egg and falls, his leg twisted so badly you know, before you even look, that he will never run again. A woman slices her hand open on a flint knife while scraping hides, and days later her fingers swell and blacken, her screams echoing through the night. Men come back from the forest with bites and scratches, or worse, a wound from another man's weapon, eyes wild with pain and shame. Your job, as the village's second best liar, is to pretend you can help. You chew roots and boil herbs, press moss into wounds, chant and spit and bind, but the earth always takes its due. You might slow the rot, ease the fever, coax a little more time from a dying body, but you cannot change the ending. Sometimes people blame you when the pain does not go away. Sometimes they thank you for the smallest mercy, a day without agony, a night of sleep unbroken by shivers. Either way, it changes nothing. The most dangerous sicknesses are invisible. A cough that will not leave, a rash that spreads like spilled oil, a trembling in the limbs that turns strong hunters into useless burdens. You watch as people waste away, their eyes growing hollow, their voices fading. There are no names for most of these illnesses, just descriptions. The choking, the burning, the wasting, the madness. Some say these are curses. Others think they are punishments for sins real or imagined. You know they are simply what happens to bodies that live too close together, too cold, too hungry, too dirty for too long. When someone dies, there is little ceremony. The body is wrapped and carried away, buried with whatever token the family can spare: a shell, a piece of carved bone, a scrap of painted hide. If the death was slow and ugly, people keep their distance, afraid the sickness will leap from the corpse into their own blood. You try not to look at the faces of the living as the dead are taken away. Everyone is thinking the same thing. Who is next? You have your own scars, reminders of days when you were too slow or too trusting. A twisted finger, broken years ago and never straightened. A patch of skin on your leg that never quite healed after a long, infected cut. The occasional cough that rattles in your chest at night, making you wonder if this is the beginning of the end. You do not talk about these things. The seer is supposed to be untouchable, a bridge between worlds, not another sick and broken body among many. Sometimes, in the long hours when you cannot sleep, You imagine all the spirits you have ever blamed for suffering gathered in a circle, laughing at your efforts. You see their faces in the flames of your fire, feel their breath in the drafts that sneak through the walls. You want to ask them why, but you know you would get no answer. Suffering is its own explanation, and that is all anyone here will ever have. The children learn early to fear blood and coughs, to step back from anyone who looks too tired or moves too slowly. They make up their own rituals, spitting on the ground or tying bits of fur around their wrists, as if that will keep them safe. You do not tell them the truth. There is no safety, only luck and the thin hope that your body will last one more day. Some say that pain makes you stronger, but you have lived long enough to know that is a lie told by those who have not suffered enough. Pain makes you careful, or it makes you cruel, or it makes you tired. It never makes you wise, only desperate. When the sun sets and the fires burn low, the coughing starts again, sometimes in one hut, sometimes in many. You listen in the darkness, counting each gasp and rattle, and wonder who will still be here come morning. You do not pray for miracles. You have seen too many promises broken. You just hope, quietly, that you will be one of the lucky ones, at least for another day. Rituals are supposed to give meaning to suffering, to make pain feel necessary, maybe even sacred. In reality, the only thing sacred about your rituals is how endlessly, tediously long they are. Every time the village faces another disaster, a failed hunt, a child with a burning fever, a night when something screams in the woods, it is not long before you are summoned, not as a person, but as a tool to be used and discarded. Today the summons comes at dawn. You hear the scrape of feet outside your hut, the nervous mutter of voices. You already know what they want before they say it. The chief's oldest daughter has seen visions in her dreams, bad ones of fire and blood and something stalking through the fog. Now the whole camp is restless. Children are crying, adults are snapping at each other, and the chief himself stands at your threshold, clutching a half rotten bundle of herbs he expects you to find useful. You take the offering, pretending gratitude, and try not to let your irritation show. The preparations are always the same. You sweep out your hut, though the dirt never really leaves. You gather your worn bones, your smoke stained stones, the bundle of animal hides painted with faded symbols. You build a fire not for warmth but for effect. The right amount of smoke is crucial. Too little, and no one is impressed. Too much, and everyone chokes. The children who crowd the doorway are already coughing, but you ignore them. The chief sits across from you, his eyes wide and anxious. He wants certainty, but all you can offer is performance. You light the fire with trembling hands, whisper the words you learned as a child, words you barely believe in anymore. You toss herbs onto the flames, watch the smoke spiral and curl, thick and oily in the cramped air. You begin the chant, your voice low and steady, each word chosen less for meaning than for rhythm. It is not about what you say. It is about how long you can keep saying it before someone demands a real answer. The ritual drags on, though, as all rituals do. The room fills with smoke, sweat, and fear. The chief's daughter sits near you, knees pulled to her chest, eyes squeezed shut. She wants you to see what she saw, to feel the terror in her dreams. You oblige because you must. You shake the bones in your hands, scatter them across the hide, study the patterns they make. There is nothing special in the way they fall, nothing you have not seen 100 times before. Still, you frown, pretending to see doom or hope, or whatever the day requires. You draw lines in the dirt, spit on the fire, throw more herbs on the flames. Each gesture is slow and deliberate, stretching time until it nearly snaps. You feel the eyes on you, desperate, tired, hopeful, and angry all at once. The longer you work, the more important it seems. By the time you speak, you can see the relief in their posture. The ritual does not have to work, it just has to end. When you finally give your answer, cryptic as always, they nod solemnly. You tell them the dream means to beware the next red sunrise, to avoid the western woods, to leave offerings for the restless spirits that wander after dark. You might as well tell them to stand on their heads for all the difference it makes, but ritual demands an answer, and you provide one. The rest of the village files in, one by one, or in small, miserable groups. Some bring gifts, hoping for a favorable omen. Others bring nothing but their worries. Each gets the same performance: the bones, the smoke, the endless muttering and humming. You give the same care to all of them, not out of kindness, but because routine is your only protection. The moment you make a mistake or show doubt, they will turn on you. Faith is a shield, but it is as brittle as a dry branch. As the day drags on, your head throbs from the smoke and the chanting. Your throat is raw, your hands shake. No one notices. They only see the performance. They only want to know what will happen next, as if you could really know, as if fate is something you can bargain with. By evening, you are exhausted. The chief returns, alone this time, and asks what you saw. You give him the answer he wants. His daughter will live, but only if he follows your instructions to the letter. You see the gratitude in his face, mixed with suspicion. He wants to believe, but he also knows you are just another person pretending to know more than you do. That is the secret of all rituals. No one truly believes, but no one dares to stop believing. Night falls, the smoke lingers, the air in your hut is thick with promises you know you cannot keep. You lie down on your hard bed, your mind spinning with words and images you have repeated so many times they have lost all meaning. You wonder, just for a moment, if anyone else feels as tired as you do. You suspect they do, but tomorrow you will all rise and do it again. Ritual is survival, and survival is all you have left. Children are everywhere and nowhere in your camp, always on the edge of things, always watching, always learning what not to say. They dart between huts, vanish into the trees, reappear with muddy faces and eyes too old for their years. You remember vaguely a time when laughter came more easily from young mouths, but now it is mostly silence or the sharp cry of a child discovering for the first time just how unfair the world really is. You watch them as you work. The smallest ones sit in the dirt, stacking stones or poking sticks into ant hills, their bellies round not from abundance, but from hunger. The older children move with a weary kind of purpose, already apprenticed to the daily misery that rules this place. You see them helping their mothers grind roots, hauling water from the stream, picking lice from each other's scalps with solemn focus. Childhood here is little more than a brief training for a life of work and worry. You notice how quickly they learn to keep their voices down. Loud laughter is rare, shouting almost unheard of unless someone is hurt or lost. The adults do not encourage noise. Noise attracts attention, and attention can be dangerous. So the children practice a quiet kind of rebellion, stealing moments to splash each other with dirty water or chase a frog until it disappears into the reeds. They grow up with secrets, and you sometimes wonder what stories they will tell if they live long enough to become old. The smallest ones are at the mercy of everything. They eat what they are given, which is almost never enough. You see them chew on roots too tough for adult teeth, or gnaw the ends of sticks, anything to fill the empty ache in their bellies. Some days they find berries, and for a few minutes their faces are sticky with juice, a rare color against all the mud and dust. Other days, they eat nothing but hope and watchfulness. They are resourceful because they must be. When a storm blows in, they are the first to scramble for shelter, pressing against the walls of huts that leak and rattle in the wind. When someone is sick, they learn not to get too close. When there is a raid, they know to hide in the narrowest corners, clutching their knees and biting their lips until the shouting stops. You have seen children barely able to walk, dragging younger siblings to safety, already old before their time. Death is not a surprise to them. They have seen too many siblings and playmates vanish overnight, taken by sickness, swallowed by the forest, or simply lost to the endless accidents of a world that is always hungry. The elders say not to speak the names of the dead, and the children obey, but you can see the names linger in their eyes, unspoken questions pressed into silence. Some pretend not to notice when someone is missing. Others whisper about spirits and curses in the dark, repeating the rituals they have seen from adults but do not yet understand. You are often called to perform small rites for the children, charms for luck, words to chase away nightmares or invite good dreams. Sometimes you press a painted stone into a tiny palm. Sometimes you mark their foreheads with ash. You know it is for the parents as much as for the children, a thin veneer of hope painted over worry. The little ones cling to these tokens as if something as small as a bone or feather could keep the world at bay. The games they play are imitations of survival. One child is the hunter, the rest are prey. They take turns pretending to be wounded, crawling through the grass, shrieking in mock terror until someone gets hurt for real. There is always a scuffle, always a lesson in what not to do. You watch from a distance, trying to remember if you ever played, or if you were always the one with the painted face and solemn voice, reciting words you did not believe. When night comes, the children crowd into huts, piling together for warmth. The oldest tell stories, mostly warnings dressed up as adventure. Do not stray too far from the fire. Do not eat berries you do not know. Do not look the stranger in the eye. You know these are not stories for fun. They are lessons, repeated until they are reflex. The only defense against a world where mistakes are almost always fatal. You sometimes wonder what becomes of the children who make it through. They grow taller, their eyes harden, their hands become rough and scarred. By 10 years old, they are indistinguishable from adults, except for a fleeting moment of softness in the way they reach for each other in the night. You have seen children go to sleep and wake up old, and you wonder if you did the same. You know better than to promise any of them a future. The world they inherit is smaller and meaner than the one you remember, and you have no words to soften the truth. All you can do is give them a charm, a story, a ritual to hold on to as they wait for another dawn. You watch them as they curl up in the dirt, limbs tangled together, eyes already drifting away into dreams, and you wish, foolishly, uselessly, that things could be different. In the morning, some of them will wake, and some of them will not, and life, such as it is, will go on. If you ever believed there was dignity in labor, that belief has long since been scraped away by 1,000 days of crawling through mud, fighting splinters and breaking nails on tasks so repetitive and thankless that you barely remember starting them. Work here is not a calling or a source of pride. It is simply the water you swim in, the air you breathe, the punishment you must endure in order to keep surviving. Every morning, before the sun has bothered to drag itself over the horizon, the sounds of labor begin. There is no rooster to crow, no bell to ring, just the groans of aching bodies rising from the dirt, the hacking coughs of another day begun, the creak and slap of bodies already tired before anything has been accomplished. You are no exception. It does not matter that you are the seer, the keeper of rituals and secrets. Hunger, cold, and dirt do not care about titles. When firewood needs gathering, or a wounded deer must be skinned, or water carried from a stream choked with mud and leeches, you are just another pair of hands. Some tasks are ceremonial, supposedly reserved for those of high status. But even the act of divining fortunes involves preparation, scraping the hide clean of yesterday's ash, repainting the symbols that have faded, rearranging the stones and bones that always seem to scatter themselves at night. You tell yourself that this is important, that your craft matters, but deep down you know it is only a brief distraction from more basic labor. When the rituals are finished, there is always wood to split, holes to dig, roots to pound into bitter paste. The women, especially, bear the brunt of this ceaseless grind. You watch them lug baskets heavy with damp firewood or stones for the fire pit, their backs bent, their faces set in grim lines. They kneel for hours, grinding corn or roots between stones, the rhythm of their work as relentless as the hunger that drives it. Children, barely able to walk, are already set to work picking bugs from hides or shooing crows from the grain. There are no days off, no hours when the camp was with rest or laughter. You join in the work, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of the bitter understanding that doing nothing is worse. The dirt gets under your fingernails. The cold water numbs your hands until you cannot feel the scrapes and blisters. Every task is an invitation to injury, a slipped knife, a splinter that festers, a basket dropped on a bare foot. You keep going because you must. No one will do your share for you. Some chores are almost laughable in their futility. The mud you sweep out of your hut in the morning is back by nightfall. The firewood you gather is always too damp, the smoke always too thick. The little food you manage to coax from the earth is never enough. Still, you go through the motions. Routine is the only thing standing between you and despair. If you stopped, even for a day, you suspect the camp would collapse in on itself, buried beneath its own inertia. Evenings bring no relief. When the sun finally slips away and the cold sets in, you find yourself patching the walls of your hut, mending holes in your clothes with sinew and bone needles, picking the last edible scraps from the bones of yesterday's meal. You watch the others doing the same, the weariness in their movements so familiar it has become a kind of silent language. There is no talk of dreams or ambitions. There is only the quiet calculation of what can be done before sleep becomes irresistible. Occasionally, someone in the camp remembers to tell a story, a reminder of days when work was for celebration, not survival. There are tales of harvest feasts, of hunting parties returning with enough meat for everyone, of laughter echoing through long summer evenings. These stories always feel as thin and insubstantial as the smoke that drifts from your fire. You nod along, but you do not believe. You doubt the children believe either. You sometimes hear your own name spoken in half-joking tones. Let the seer predict when this log will split. Let the seer ask the spirits where the last basket of nuts went. You pretend to laugh, but there is no humor in it, only the tired resignation of people who know that nothing comes easy and nothing ever will. As night falls, you collapse onto your bed of hides and dirt, every muscle aching, every joint stiff. You stare up at the patched roof and wonder if tomorrow will be any different. It will not be. Labor is the one certainty you can depend on, a dull, grinding wheel that never stops turning, never lets you rest. In the darkness, you listen to the quiet sounds of others settling down, the soft murmur of voices, the clatter of bones, the occasional cough. You are all prisoners of the same endless, thankless work, bound together not by hope, but by the sheer, stubborn refusal to stop. Another day ends, and the burden of labor waits patiently for you to begin again. You wake up in the same clothes you wore to sleep because you do not own anything else. There is no such thing as changing for the day or dressing for an occasion. You simply pull the tattered hide tighter around your shoulders, trying to squeeze a little warmth from material that has long since lost all memory of softness. Your clothing, if you can call it that, is a patchwork of animal skins, brittle grass, and the odd, improbable scrap of woven cloth, each piece worn thin by time, by weather, by the ceaseless friction of labor and survival. Every piece tells a story, but none of the stories are happy ones. The tunic you wear is made from the hide of an animal you barely remember killing, patched in places with the skins of smaller, less lucky creatures. Stains and burn marks trace the history of hundreds of smoky nights crouched by a fire that never burns clean. The color is indeterminate, somewhere between dirt and old blood, with an overlay of greenish mold in the places that never fully dry. You know that if you tried to wash it, it would probably dissolve. There was a time when clothing meant something: status, ceremony, celebration. Once you saw a woman wearing a necklace of bright beads, and you stared at it as if it were a talisman. Now, beads are rare and usually end up on children's burial shrouds, a final, futile gesture toward beauty in a world that does not care. Most people do not have the luxury of ornament. A frayed string around the wrist, a feather tucked into a braid, a bone button holding a cloak closed. These are the heights of fashion. You spend time every week, sometimes every day, mending your clothes with whatever you can find: animal sinew, strips of bark, bits of cord scavenged from broken baskets. You do not bother to match the colors or materials. You are grateful simply to cover the holes, to keep the worst of the wind from whistling straight through to your skin. Every patch is a memory of last winter's frostbite, of the branch that tore your sleeve, of the fire that flared up and left a jagged burn along your hip. You do not keep track of these things anymore. There is no point. Shoes are another story. Most of the time, you go barefoot, your soles so calloused and cracked that sharp stones are more of an annoyance than a real threat. If you are lucky, you might find a scrap of hide large enough to wrap around your feet and tie with strips of leather. The first time you made a pair of shoes, you were proud. By the third or fourth time, you understood that they were just another thing to be lost or ruined by mud, water, or careless fire. Now you wear whatever you can, and if your feet are cut and bleeding by evening, at least you know you will not freeze yet. When it rains, your clothes absorb water like a sponge. You feel the cold seep into your bones, and everything becomes heavier: your body, your movements, your thoughts. When the wind blows, it finds every gap, every ragged edge, and sends shivers through your tired flesh. You wrap yourself tighter, hunch your shoulders, and pretend it does not matter. It always matters, but complaining about the cold is as useless as complaining about the mud. You have seen people in your camp. usually the oldest or the youngest, walking in nothing but rags, their skin exposed to the elements. The young cry until they learn not to, the old simply endure. Everyone here understands that clothing is just another thing the world wants to take from you. You do not waste pity on others for being cold or bare. You save your pity for the days when you wake to find your own clothes missing, stolen by someone more desperate, or simply fallen apart in the night. In rare moments, you remember stories of the old days, how your ancestors dressed in cloaks dyed bright red and blue, how they adorned themselves with shells, quills, and beads. You wonder if those stories were ever true, or if they were invented to make you forget that now you are lucky if you can find enough to cover your body at all. You suspect that even the spirits, if they look down on you, do so with a shudder. There are no mirrors in your world, only the occasional glimpse of your reflection in a puddle or a shiny stone. You hardly recognize the person staring back. Wild hair matted with sweat and grease, face streaked with soot, clothes clinging to your thin frame in tatters. You have grown used to the look, the smell, the itch. Vanity is for those who have something left to lose. At night, when the temperature drops, you wrap yourself in every scrap you can find, layering hides, grass mats, old rags. Still, the cold always finds a way in. You fall asleep shivering, dreaming of warmth you have not felt in years. In your dreams, you sometimes wear fine clothes, soft, colorful, whole, but morning always brings you back to reality. Nothing but rags. Nothing but the bare minimum required to survive another day. You rise, shrugging off the cold, and tie your patched cloak around your shoulders. It is not enough, but it is all you have. And like in everything else in this life, it will have to do. Religion, for you, is less a matter of faith and more a matter of obligation. You are supposed to be its guardian, the keeper of stories, the voice that speaks for the spirits, the one who can read omens in the flight of birds or the shapes in the smoke. But when you kneel by the fire and begin your slow, rhythmic chant, you are not moved by devotion. You are moved by necessity. Fear is the only God that truly listens here, and you, seer, liar, survivor, are its most faithful priest. Everyone in your camp is religious, though none will admit it in those words. They say they follow the ways of the ancestors, that the spirits live in the rivers, in the woods, in the restless wind. They say the old rituals keep away sickness and bad luck, that every offering placed on the fire is a debt paid, a bargain struck with powers you cannot see and barely dare to name. But you know what really drives them. You see it in their eyes, in the way they flinch at every crack of thunder, in the hurried, whispered prayers when someone coughs too hard at night. Belief is not hope. Here, belief is fear with a better disguise. The ceremonies, like everything else, are grim and joyless. You light the fire with slow, deliberate movements because haste is an invitation to disaster. You scatter the herbs, chant the words passed down by those who came before you, never quite sure if you have remembered them correctly. If the fire catches on the first try, people nod, reassured. If it does not, they look at you sideways, searching for some sign of failure, some hidden flaw. You have learned to mask your uncertainty. Religion, like hunger, does not tolerate weakness. You are expected to know all the right offerings for every occasion, the right fish bones to hang above a sick child's bed, the correct way to mark a doorway against wandering spirits, the proper song to sing when someone is dying. You do what you can, but the rules are endless and contradictory, and the only real truth is that nothing works for long. The river will flood when it pleases. The wind will blow away your shelter in the night. The disease will come no matter how many charms you bury in the mud. Still, you keep up the rituals because the alternative, a world with no rules at all, is more frightening than failure. You sometimes wonder how much of your religion is actually your own invention. In the darkest hours, you remember the times you improvised, filling gaps in your knowledge with made up prayers, new gestures, a chant whispered ho just a little differently so that no one would notice you had forgotten the words. No one ever noticed. They were too busy watching the fire, hoping for a sign, anything to reassure them that the world is not entirely made of chaos and accident. Fear keeps everyone obedient. The elders tell stories about those who broke taboos, women who spoke during sacred ceremonies, hunters who took more than their share, children who mocked the spirits and vanished soon after. These stories are not told for entertainment. They are lessons, warnings, weapons used to keep everyone in line. You see the tension in the faces around the fire, the careful silence when certain subjects are mentioned. Everyone knows that a careless word can mean the difference between safety and disaster. You have learned that fear is contagious. A single bad dream, a strange noise in the night, a shadow that looks too much like a person, these are enough to send ripples through the camp, to make even the most skeptical among you start muttering prayers and searching for omens. You feed their fears because that is your job. It is what keeps the camp together, keeps people doing what they must, keeps them from turning on you or each other. Sometimes you think of yourself as a shepherd, sometimes as a jailer. Your own fears are not so easily managed. You fear the forest, with its silent threats and patient predators. You fear sickness, creeping through the huts like smoke. You fear the anger of the tribe, quick and merciless as a storm. And beneath it all, you fear the emptiness, the possibility that the spirits are not real, that the stories mean nothing, that you are only talking to yourself in the dark. This is a fear you do not share, not even with the wind. At night, when you are alone, you listen to the sounds of the camp, the coughs and murmurs, the shuffling feet, the crackle of dying fires. You whisper a prayer, not because you believe, but because you are afraid not to. You tie a piece of bone around your wrist, murmur a blessing over your bed, spit into the fire for luck. You do all the things you tell others to do, hoping that one of them might work, that the old stories might be true for once. Fear is what keeps you alive. and what keeps you from living. It is the secret at the heart of every ritual, every offering, every whispered prayer in the dark. It is the one thing you can count on, the one thing you truly understand. The world is big and hungry, and you are small and afraid, and in every day is another negotiation with powers you cannot see. In the morning, you will rise and lead another ceremony. You will offer another prayer to gods you are not sure exist, and people will watch you, hoping you are right, fearing you are not. You will light the fire, scatter the herbs, and pretend to believe. And when the fire sputters and the shadows lengthen, you will know that for one more day, fear has been satisfied. In your world, the work of women is everywhere and nowhere. It is visible in every bowl of bitter mash, every repaired garment, every patched wound, every squalling child who lives to see another morning. But it is invisible in the sense that nobody ever talks about it, nobody ever thanks them, and nobody ever dreams of escaping it. It is simply the air they breathe, the ground they walk, the inheritance passed down from mothers to daughters, with all the gentleness of a stone dropped into mud. You watch the women move through the camp, never still, never at rest. At dawn, they are already awake, kneeling over fires, pounding roots into meal, nursing infants who cry not from hunger alone, but from the endless aching discomfort that is the only world they know. The women coax food from a reluctant earth, grind grain between stones until their hands blister and bleed, scrape the hides of animals until their knuckles are raw and split. Their work does not end at sunset. It does not end at all. If you look closely, you see the signs of exhaustion everywhere. The way a woman stands with her back hunched, as if bracing herself against an invisible wind. The lines carved deep into faces that were once young. The hands, strong but swollen, fingers curled from too many years gripping tools that were never meant to last. Some women walk with a limp that nobody mentions. Some bear scars from accidents or births or nights when violence comes home from the forest and there is nowhere to hide. Motherhood is a gamble and the stakes are always high. You see women stagger through the seasons of pregnancy with grim determination, each step a negotiation with fate. The birth of a child is greeted not with joy, but with worry, a new mouth to feed, a new life to keep alive against the odds. Women gather around the laboring mother, whispering encouragement and warnings, but everyone knows the truth. Birth is as likely to bring death as life. You have performed more rituals for safe childbirth than you care to count, and you know the outcomes are as random as dice in the dust. Those who survive, mothers and children alike, are marked by the ordeal. Some women never fully recover, their strength spent, their bodies ruined in ways that cannot be seen and will never be spoken aloud. Others become distant, their laughter turned brittle, their eyes fixed on something far away. You do not blame them. There is no room for softness here, no reward for sentimentality. There is an unspoken hierarchy among the women, determined by age, luck, and the number of children who have survived. The elders sit on the fringes, doling out advice and scorn in equal measure, sometimes remembered, sometimes ignored. Younger women do the hardest work, the most dangerous tasks. They fetch water from the distant stream, risking snakes and worse. They haul heavy baskets, gather firewood, tend fires that never burn quite right. There is always something to be done, and always someone who will suffer if it is not done well enough. The men in your camp carry their own burdens, but theirs are more visible, more easily celebrated. They hunt, they fight, they boast about the things they have survived. The women do the rest, and nobody sings about them. Nobody carves their stories into bone or stone. Their heroism is measured in scraped pots and mended cloaks, in meals stretched to feed one more mouth, in wounds cleaned and fevers tended in the dark. There are moments when you see them together, sharing stories or laughter in the flickering firelight. It is a hard, wry laughter, full of irony and the knowledge that nothing ever gets easier. They trade advice on stubborn stains, sick children, uncooperative husbands. Sometimes a joke will pass around the circle quick as a swallow, and for a moment the burden seems lighter. You wonder how long it has been since any of them dreamed of anything beyond the next meal, the next winter, the next inevitable loss. Their rituals are practical, stripped of all pretense. They do not wait for omens or blessings. They spit on their palms before starting hard work, tie scraps of cloth around the wrists of sick children, place a pebble under the tongue of a woman in labor. You provide the ceremonies when asked, but you know they trust their own ways more than your words. Theirs is a wisdom born of pain, not of stories or bones or smoke. In the rare moments when a woman's burden becomes too heavy, when grief or exhaustion or simple bad luck breaks her, the camp closes ranks. Her work is quietly taken up by others. Food appears at her door. Children are watched by neighbors. There are no speeches, no comforting words, just the silent, stubborn understanding that survival here is a group effort, even when everyone is tired of it. You respect the women, though you do not say it aloud. In a world that refuses comfort, they create small islands of it, shared meals, warm arms, a whispered story for a frightened child. They are the keepers of everything that is worth saving, even if nothing ever truly gets saved. When the day ends, the women sleep last and rise first. You sometimes wonder what would happen if, just for a single day, they simply stopped. The camp would collapse, the fires would die, and even the spirits would fall silent, waiting for someone to begin again. But that day never comes. The weight of existence presses down, and they bear it because there is no other choice. Elders in your camp are less like leaders and more like artifacts, worn, slightly mysterious objects kept around out of habit or guilt. You watch them shuffle between the fires, bent and brittle, faces carved by wind and sorrow into living maps of every bad season, every sickness, every child buried too soon. Their hair, where it has not fallen out, is white and thin, their eyes clouded with the smoke of 1,000 cold nights. In a world that barely has room for the living, the old persist as uneasy reminders of what waits at the end of every story. They are not honored so much as endured. People speak to them with a mixture of respect and impatience, seeking advice only when desperation outweighs pride. Their wisdom is practical, rarely poetic. They know the best way to stretch a meal, the quickest cure for an infected wound, the most likely place to find dry wood when the rain will not stop. But these are not secrets. They are the leftovers of 100,000 days spent surviving. No one thanks the elders for sharing any more than you would thank the dirt for existing. Sometimes the elders are asked to tell stories, but even that is a mixed blessing. Their tales are not the hopeful kind. They speak of lost harvests, wars with neighbors, children who disappeared into the forest, winters so cold that the river froze solid and did not thaw until half the camp was gone. You have noticed how the children fidget during these stories, eyes darting to the door, longing to escape. The past here is not a place of wonder or nostalgia. It is a warning, a burden, a reason to keep your head down and your hopes even lower. Their bodies are failing, but the old do not expect sympathy. If they are lucky, they are allowed to sit by the fire and watch others work. The price of their long endurance paid in sore joints and failing sight. If they are unlucky, if there is not enough food, or if the weather is too cruel, they are simply ignored, left to doze in the sun or shiver in the dark. Some try to help anyway, gathering kindling with hands twisted by age, weaving baskets that unravel as soon as they are finished. Their efforts are more symbolic than useful, but no one has the heart to tell them. In private, people whisper about the elders as if old age were a contagious curse. They joke about who will be next to go quiet, who will slip away in the night and not be found until morning. These jokes are not cruel, only tired. There is a resignation here, a sense that survival is mostly luck, and the lucky do not get to keep it forever. You have seen the old fall asleep by the fire and not wake up, and the morning is brief. A few words, a burned offering, a silent glance at the shrinking circle around the flames. Some elders cling to ritual. They insist on the old ways, the old songs, the rules nobody else remembers or cares to follow. They are quick to scold the young for mistakes, for laziness, for disrespect, but their authority is mostly a memory. The world has moved on, and their words are as faded as the beads on their frayed necklaces. You perform ceremonies with them when asked, out of habit more than faith, both of you going through motions that once meant something, but now are just ways to pass the time. Occasionally, an elder will surprise you with a spark of defiance, a sharp joke, a bawdy song, a bit of gossip whispered with a wink. These moments are precious and rare, like the last coals of a dying fire. You treasure them, knowing how quickly they fade. More often, you find the old ones staring into the distance, lost in memory or waiting for whatever comes next. They talk less and less, their stories turning inward as if already rehearsing for silence. It is said that in better times, the elders were the keepers of wisdom, the ones who remembered what everyone else had forgotten. Now, their memories are less an asset and more a reminder of everything lost, places you can never return to, people whose names are spoken only at funerals, seasons when the world was less cruel. You sometimes think that old age here is a kind of haunting, a slow fading rather than a clean break. Still, there is a stubbornness to the old that you cannot help but admire. They endure, even when enduring means nothing more than waking up again, finding a seat by the fire, and watching another day crawl past. They have outlived storms and wars and famine. They have nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear. In this, perhaps, there is a kind of freedom. When the fire burns low and the camp falls quiet, you hear the elders breathing, slow and steady, as if daring the night to do its worst. You suspect, in your most honest moments, that you are not afraid of becoming old. You are afraid of being forgotten before you get there. At night, when the wind rattles the thin walls and the fire burns low, people sometimes ask you for a story. It is not for pleasure, not really. The children are hungry and afraid. The adults are restless and tired, and everyone is looking for something to distract them from the cold or the sound of coughing in the next hut. You are expected to remember the old legends, the stories that once promised hope or bravery, or at least a sense that suffering served some greater purpose. You do your best, but every year the stories grow fainter, the legends worn away by the same unrelenting boredom and misery that erodes everything else. You begin, as you always do, with the voices of your ancestors. You speak of the first people, of how the world was shaped from clay and blood, of the spirits that once walked beside mortals and gave them fire, music, dreams. The children listen for a while, but you can see their attention drifting. There are no miracles in their lives, no talking animals, no heroes who return from the dead. They have heard these stories before. Most of them can mouth the words along with you, but repetition has dulled the magic. The adults pretend to listen too, but their eyes are distant, focused on chores still unfinished or losses too recent to set aside. The legends, once a lifeline in hard times, have become a background hum, something to fill the silence, to push back the darkness for another hour. You try to add drama to make your voice rise and fall, but even you cannot escape the irony. You are spinning tales of glory and cunning in a place where survival depends more on dumb luck and stubbornness than clever tricks or ancient bargains. Sometimes you change the stories, inventing new heroes or different endings. No one notices. No one corrects you. The old details, how the river was created, why the owl never speaks to humans, or the moon hides her face when she is ashamed, do not matter much anymore. The stories themselves are just placeholders, as fragile and temporary as the fire that lights your words. You remember when legends served a purpose. They explained why bad things happened, who was to blame, how order could be restored if only the right words were spoken, the right offerings made. Now, The explanations are less important than the act of telling. It is a way to show the children that the world once made sense, or at least pretended to. You hope that in the telling, you can keep something alive, if only for a little while. You notice, too, how the stories shrink with every winter. The names of ancient heroes are forgotten, replaced by vague gestures and unfinished memories. The villains, once terrifying and specific, are now just the others, faceless enemies in the woods, blamed for every missing chicken or unexplained shadow. Even the spirits have grown smaller, once gods and giants, now little more than cranky ghosts or unlucky breezes that blow out the fire at just the wrong moment. Sometimes the elders interrupt you, correcting a detail or muttering about how you have left out the best parts. You nod politely, then continue as you please. Even the elders seem to know the legends are dying. Their memories are unreliable, their versions tangled in years of retelling and regret. You all agree silently to let the details slide. Occasionally, a child asks a question. Why did the trickster fox give up his tail? Where did the sun go during the great darkness? Why do we still leave offerings at the river if the spirits never answer? You improvise, weaving new explanations from scraps of old stories, hoping to satisfy them for one more night. You have learned that the purpose of a legend is not to explain, but to comfort. If comfort means lying, you are well practiced. There is a certain sadness to the vanishing of legends, but there is relief too. The world you inherited was built on promises and bargains with unseen forces, but none of those bargains hold anymore. Survival is not granted by spirits or heroes. It is claimed day by day through pain and luck and the blind, stupid persistence of people who have nothing better to do. The stories are fading because they no longer fit, and you know it. You suspect everyone else does too. Still, you keep telling them, even if the words are hollow, even if the magic is gone. The act of remembering is itself an act of defiance, an insistence that not everything can be erased by hunger and fear. You watch the children as they fall asleep, their faces slack with exhaustion, and you wonder if any of your words will stay with them. You doubt it, but doubt is as constant as dirt and cold in your world. When the fire finally dies, you let the silence fill the hut. Another legend has faded, another night survived. You wrap yourself in your ragged blanket and stare at the ceiling, listening to the wind, feeling the stories slip away like smoke. In the end, you suspect only the silence will remain. You like to imagine that people would tire of fighting each other, given how much energy is already spent just keeping death at bay. But the truth is, feuds are one of the few things in your world that seem to renew themselves generation after generation, as reliable as hunger and cold. It does not matter how small the camp, how tight the winter, or how many times you try to broker peace with rituals and words. Revenge is the thread that ties everyone together, tighter and tighter, until something breaks. The reasons for feuds are always simple and always the same. A stolen chicken, a disputed patch of berries, a careless insult at the wrong moment. Sometimes the original offense is forgotten, lost to memory, and replaced with new grievances, each more pointless than the last. It does not matter. What matters is the feeling, the hot, pulsing certainty that someone, somewhere, has taken something from you and it must be answered. People come to you for omens, for curses, for some hint that the spirits approve of what they are already determined to do. You do not like these requests, but you cannot refuse them. You have learned to hedge your words, to mutter about balance and patience, but you know your listeners only hear what they want. If you warn them of disaster, they take it as a sign to strike first. If you predict peace, they assume you are hiding something. The rituals of revenge are as old as any other in the camp. A secret meeting at the edge of the forest, a handful of grave dirt thrown into a fire, a whispered promise to ancestors whose names are only remembered when there is blood to be paid. You have watched families split apart over things no one can remember, seen neighbors become enemies over a single broken promise. Feuds do not end, they just shift shape, pass from one set of hands to another, like an old wound that never heals. Sometimes revenge is swift, a stone thrown, a hut set alight, a dog killed in the night. Other times it festers, growing into something so tangled and bitter that even those involved forget what it is like not to hate. Children learn the names of enemies before they can tie their own shoes. They repeat the stories, sharpen the insults, invent new reasons to keep the fire burning. The old teach the young how to hide anger behind a smile, how to bide their time, how to recognize the opportunity for payback when it comes. You see it in their eyes, the way they watch each other across the fire, measuring every word, weighing every gesture. For all the talk of honor and tradition, most feuds are driven by desperation and fear. There is not enough food, not enough warmth, not enough hope. It is easier to blame someone else for your misery than to admit the world simply does not care. Revenge, at least, feels like control. It gives people a reason to act, a story to tell themselves when nothing else makes sense. You are often called to witness acts of retribution, to declare the balance restored or the debt repaid. You watch as someone spits into the dirt, mutters a curse, turns their back on a former friend. Sometimes the violence is public, a brawl at the edge of camp, a shriek in the night, the dull thud of a stone hitting where it should not. Other times it is quiet, a stolen bundle of firewood, a handful of berries crushed underfoot, a word whispered into the wrong ear. You mark these moments, not because they matter to the spirits, but because they will matter to you when the next round of questions begins. Reconciliation is rare and always temporary. Someone may offer a token, half a basket of dried meat, a carved bone, a mumbled apology, but forgiveness is never complete. The memory of old wrongs is as persistent as the mud, and just as likely to trip you when you least expect it. You have seen two men shake hands one morning and fight again by sunset, their smiles as brittle as frost. Occasionally, revenge spirals out of control, dragging the whole camp into a tangle of suspicion and spite. People stop sharing what little they have. Children fight in the mud. Elders mutter about curses that cannot be lifted. You do what you can, burn herbs, chant, warn everyone that the spirits are growing impatient, but in your heart you know the truth. People want to hate. They need the excuse, the ritual, the enemy. It gives shape to their suffering. At night, when the camp is quiet, you sometimes wonder if you are to blame. Maybe, if you had been braver, you could have told everyone the truth that nothing will ever make things fair, that the world is a place of accidents, not balance. But then you remember that your job is not to end the cycle, only to keep it turning. The rituals must continue. The stories must be told. The debts must be paid. It is not justice, but it is something. The next day, someone will come to you with another request, an omen, a curse, a sign. You will do as you always do. Shuffle the bones, mutter the words, pretend to believe that revenge brings order, even when you know it only brings more revenge. And life in the camp will stumble on, fueled by memory and grievance, one feud at a time. You would think that constant danger and deprivation might keep boredom at bay, but the truth is, monotony weaves through every hour, heavier than hunger, more persistent than cold. There are only so many ways to dig roots, to scrape hides, to tell the same lies, and go through the same motions, day after unremarkable day. Survival is not a grand adventure. It is repetition polished to the dullest possible shine. You know every knot in the wood of your hut, every stubborn stone under your sleeping mat, every crack in the walls where the wind sneaks through at night. The world is so small that you can cross it in a few dozen steps. From your hut to the dying fire, to the muddy path to the woods, to the trickle of a stream that never runs clear. There is nowhere new to go, nothing new to see, and no task that has not been done 1,000 times before. When someone asks you to divine their fortune, it is not hope they want, but distraction. Something, anything, to break the endless sameness. You try to keep yourself busy. You patch holes in your clothing. You stir the ashes of the fire. You count the stones you use for casting fortunes. Sometimes you invent new rituals just for the sake of variety. A bone buried under the doorstep, a chant whispered backwards, a small offering placed in a different corner of the camp. Nobody notices. They go along with whatever you do, because going along is easier than questioning, and because nobody expects anything to actually change. Conversation is limited, cycling through the same stale subjects: who is sick, who is missing, who might be to blame for the latest misfortune. When the weather is bad, you all cram together under leaking roofs and talk about the weather. When the weather is good, you sit outside and wait for it to turn. Even gossip grows thin. There are only so many times you can discuss someone else's bad luck before it starts to feel like your own. Children are bored too, but their boredom is sharper, restless, and reckless. They invent games that mimic the same old dangers: hide and seek among the trees, racing along the edge of the stream, throwing stones at birds that are too smart to come close. Every game is a rehearsal for grown up misery, and even the youngest soon learn that boredom, like hunger, is something you just endure. You sometimes think about leaving, but where would you go? The forest is hostile, the river uncrossable, and the next camp is rumored to be just as miserable as your own. Besides, you know that the sameness would follow you. Your bones, your hands, your thoughts, they are already shaped by this place, by its routines and its narrow expectations. Escape is not a real option. It is only another story you tell yourself to pass the time. The elders do not speak of boredom, but you see it in the way they stare into the fire, eyes glazed and empty. The women sing the same songs, the men tell the same stories, all of you circling the same slow drain. On rare occasions, someone drinks too much of the fermented berries or chews a root that numbs the tongue. For a brief moment, the world grows fuzzy, the edges blur, and boredom gives way to something like numbness. But it never lasts. Sobriety always returns, as relentless as sunrise. What makes the boredom worse is the powerlessness beneath it. You can patch a wall or stitch a sleeve, but you cannot mend a broken season or fix a world that will not cooperate. Your rituals are performances, your predictions are guesses, your influence over events is less than you let on. You know it, and you suspect everyone else knows it too, but none of you will say it out loud. Power, like hope, is something you pretend at in order to get through the day. Sometimes you feel a brief surge of rebellion, a desire to shout, to run, to smash something just to see it break. But you do not. You bite your tongue and swallow your anger because nothing would change. The boredom is a wall, and you have learned to live inside it, pacing the same small circle until the world grows smaller still. In the evenings, as the shadows lengthen and the fire burns low, you sit and stare at nothing. You listen to the same old stories. You nod at the same complaints. You wait for someone to ask you, once again, for a sign that things will get better. You give them the same answers, the same gestures, and for a moment, the sameness feels like safety. But even in safety, you are restless. You dream of color, of noise, of a world that is not always gray and slow and silent. Then you wake to another day just like the last. You stand, stretch, and step into your own footprints, worn deeper with each passing year. Powerlessness is not a lesson you learn once. It is a truth that seeps into your bones, quiet and constant, until you can hardly remember a time when you expected anything more. The passage of seasons is less a cycle and more a series of disappointments wearing different disguises. You used to believe there was meaning in the changes, hope in the greening of spring, relief in the long days of summer, wisdom in the chill of autumn, rest in the silence of winter. Now you know better. Each season brings its own peculiar brand of hardship, its own promise of fatigue, that settles deeper with every turn of the earth. Spring, they say, is a time of renewal. For you, it is mud, endless, boot sucking, hope drowning mud. The snow melts into a mess that swallows anything dropped, stains everything else, and brings with it a chill that seeps through every patched hide and woven mat. New growth is stingy and slow, the first green shoots snapped up by anyone hungry enough to crawl into the half thawed underbrush. Your hands ache from digging for roots in soil that still bites with the memory of frost. Every breath is thick with dampness and rot. Summer follows, heavy and slow, its warmth quickly curdling into a swarm of insects. The air is thick with gnats and biting flies. You spend days slapping your arms and face, trying to ignore the itch of bites that never heal and the relentless whine in your ears. Water turns foul, thick with algae and things that squirm. The sun bakes the mud into a cracked mosaic, but the heat only adds new burdens. Sweat mingles with grime, and sleep becomes another chore, interrupted by the scratch of flea bites and the cry of thirsty children. The berries ripen all at once, an abundance that lasts barely a week before the birds and desperate hands strip the bushes bare. Autumn is a false promise, a brief window when the air grows cool and the world seems almost manageable. You pick what you can, gathering nuts and roots and anything else that might keep through the winter. Every basket is counted, every handful weighed against the memory of lean years. You know, even as you work, that it is not enough. It is never enough. The wind sharpens, the sun retreats, and each day shortens into another reminder that the worst is yet to come. Winter is not just a cold, it is exhaustion pressed into every joint, every bone, every thought. The world shrinks to the size of your hut, your fire, your own breath steaming in the darkness. You ration the last of the stores, watch the firewood dwindle, listen to the wind tear at the walls. Sleep offers no real escape. There is always someone coughing in the night, always a draft that finds its way under the covers, always the gnaw of hunger, never far away. The fatigue is different in winter. It is not just physical, but total, a weariness that sinks into your mind and soul. You dream of warmth, but wake to cold ashes and the knowledge that the world outside would rather kill you than shelter you. Fatigue is the only thing that lasts, the one season that never ends. Your arms grow heavy from lifting, your feet from walking, your head from carrying too many worries. Each year adds another layer until you are wearing exhaustion like a second skin, ragged and impossible to mend. You see it in the faces around you, in the slumped shoulders, the slowed movements, the eyes that do not bother to look for hope. There are rituals for each season, of course, ceremonies to welcome the sun, to beg the rain to fall or to stop, to give thanks for whatever little survives the changing world. You perform them because it is expected, because someone has to keep pretending that there is order, that the cycles mean something more than a slow grinding toward the grave. But inside, you feel only the slow erosion of everything: energy, spirit, belief. Fatigue makes every task harder, every day longer, every argument more likely to end in silence. Even the children, who once seemed tireless, now drag their feet, their games half hearted, their laughter sounding more like memory than hope. You tell yourself to keep moving, to keep working, but the reason slips away with the daylight. You are not waiting for better times. You are only waiting for the next thing to endure. There is no relief, only the changing face of the same old struggle. When the wind howls or the sun bakes, when the rain turns paths to rivers, or the snow buries everything in silence, you tell yourself it is only for a season. But you know that fatigue is the truest season of all, and it will outlast every storm and every prayer. So you rise again with each new dawn, dragging your tired body into the tasks that never change, through seasons that bring nothing but new ways to be tired. You endure because that is what everyone does here, not because there is hope or glory or wisdom to be found, only the slow, relentless passage of time and the endless fatigue it leaves behind. Loss is not a rare event in your life. It is the steady background hum, the drumbeat behind every task, the certainty that underlies all uncertainty. You lose things constantly: people, possessions, hope, even the stories that once made loss feel like something worth surviving. No one here expects to keep anything for long. To live in your world is to be an expert at letting go, at pretending that the ache of absence is just another feeling you can get used to, like hunger or cold. You lose people first. Sometimes they vanish quietly: a child who wanders too far into the forest, a hunter who never returns from setting traps, an elder who simply does not wake up. Other times, loss is loud and chaotic: a fever sweeping through the camp, a raid in the night, a birth that turns into a funeral before the sun rises. You stop counting after a while. Grief is not an event here, but a season without end. There are rituals, of course. You perform them out of habit, not belief, whispering the right words over the fire, burning scraps of cloth, or offering bits of food to spirits who never seem to notice. You help bury the bodies, or what is left of them, in shallow graves at the edge of the trees. Sometimes you mark the place with a stone, sometimes not. There are too many graves, too few stones. You tell yourself that forgetting is a kind of mercy, that the less you remember, the lighter your heart becomes. But you know better. The weight of loss is not measured by memory. It settles into the bones, slow and permanent. You lose things too: a knife left in the woods, a basket swept away by the river, a patch of land ruined by fire or frost. Each loss is an inconvenience at best, a disaster at worst. The camp grows smaller every year, not just in numbers, but in comfort, in certainty. Every time you lose a tool, a blanket, a patch of food, you feel the world shrink a little more, become a little harder to bear. Hope is the slipperiest loss. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet disappointment, a promise that never comes true, a morning when the sun rises on nothing new. Other times it leaves suddenly, like a bird startled into flight. You watch it go and tell yourself it will come back, but most days you know better. You see it in the faces around you, the resignation, the dullness, the careful way people avoid looking too far ahead. Hope is a dangerous luxury, the kind of thing that gets you killed if you try to hold on to it too tightly. There are stories about how people used to mourn, how they would gather to weep and wail and sing songs that made the dead feel loved. Now, mourning is private, silent, a business conducted in the darkness of your own hut. You grieve by working, by muttering curses at the fire, by pressing your hand to your heart and pretending you do not feel the sharp edge of absence. The world does not pause for sorrow. The work goes on. The hunger persists. The next loss is always waiting. Children are the ones who learn the lesson fastest. You see them glance at empty spaces, at bowls left unused, at places by the fire that grow cold and dusty. They do not ask where the lost ones have gone. They know not to speak the names. They practice forgetting, even as they carry their own small sorrows in pockets and behind clenched teeth. There is no consolation, no wisdom to be found in loss. The rituals you perform offer nothing but distraction. The words you speak sound hollow, even to you. The stories you tell grow shorter, the details fading, the meaning lost. You tell yourself it does not matter, that survival is its own answer, that you are stronger for everything you have let go. But in the quiet moments, you know the truth. You are not stronger, you are only emptier. Every night you count your losses, not in numbers, but in silences, in the weight of things left unsaid, in the empty spaces where laughter and hope used to live. The fire burns lower, the wind is colder. Another day ends with less than you started. You close your eyes and wonder what you will lose tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. You are still here. That is the only victory loss will allow. You would think that a lifetime spent in the shadow of death would make you wise or brave, or at least more philosophical. It does not. It just makes you numb. At some point, death ceases to be a visitor and becomes a permanent resident, a silent figure always at the edge of your campfire, waiting for its turn in the endless rotation of miseries. You get used to its presence, the way you get used to dirt under your nails or hunger in your gut. It is never pleasant, but it is always there, and eventually you stop noticing until it reaches out and reminds you. When someone dies, and there is always someone dying, it barely stirs the surface. There are no screams, no wailing, no public fits of grief. There is just a brief pause, a tightening around the eyes, a slight shuffle as people move to fill the space left behind. If the person was old, people nod in grim approval. They lasted longer than most. If they were young, there is a flicker of regret, quickly hidden. The body is dealt with quickly, wrapped, buried, sometimes just left to the elements if the ground is too hard or there is no one with the energy to dig. Life cannot stop for mourning. There is too much left to do. Children learn the shape of death before they know most words. They see it in the hollow faces of their elders, in the stories half finished, in the meals where a bowl goes untouched. They do not ask questions, they already know the answers. If a child does cry, it is in private, pressed into the shoulder of someone too tired to comfort them. Even comfort here is a limited resource. Your rituals for the dead have become mechanical, stripped of meaning by repetition and necessity. You murmur the old words, scatter a handful of herbs, whisper a blessing no one really believes. The others stand in a circle, heads bowed, eyes on the ground, waiting for you to finish so they can get back to their tasks. Sometimes you wonder if you are just performing for death itself, a gesture of respect for a master who never needs convincing. Death has its etiquette, its customs, its boundaries. People avoid saying the names of the dead, as if names might call them back. Belongings are either divided up quickly or thrown into the fire, depending on how much use they might still have. No one keeps mementos, no one builds shrines. The memory of a person fades quickly, replaced by the next crisis, the next empty stomach, the next cold wind. You understand, after a while, that survival demands forgetfulness. Fear of death remains, of course, but it is a different kind of fear. Not the wild terror of being hunted, but the steady dread of knowing you will not be the exception. You have seen every kind of ending: quick, slow, peaceful, violent, meaningful, absurd. Each one is the same in the end: a hole in the camp, a name no longer spoken, a lesson in impermanence. You do not tell the truth when people ask what happens after. You offer stories, half remembered myths about spirits or journeys, because people need something to hold on to. In your heart, you suspect that nothing waits beyond, nothing but the same blank silence that fills the space after a fire goes out. But you do not say this aloud. Hope, even false hope, is better than none. Every year, the line between living and dead grows thinner. You catch yourself talking to those who are gone, half expecting them to answer. Sometimes you forget, for a moment, who is still with you and who is not. It is a dangerous confusion, but also a small relief. If the dead and the living are not so different, maybe it will not matter when you finally cross that line. There are still moments, rare and sharp, when death feels new. A sudden accident, a face twisted in pain, a gasp that does not turn into breath. For a heartbeat, the old fear returns, as vivid as the first time. Then it fades, swallowed by routine. Someone will ask you to perform a ritual, to speak to the spirits, to make sense of the loss. You do your duty, then return to your own corner of the world, a little emptier than before. Getting used to death is not the same as accepting it. It is simply another skill you acquire, another habit you cannot break. You keep moving, keep working, keep speaking the old words, knowing that every day brings you closer to joining the silence. You wonder sometimes If the dead notice how quickly they are forgotten, you hope for their sake that they do not. For your own sake, you hope you will not care when your turn comes. Until then, you live among the living and the dead alike, unable to tell the difference most days, marking time with losses and forgetting to count. Death is not an end, only a pause before the next inevitable round. As evening drags its gray blanket over your camp, the day ends not with a sense of accomplishment, but with the familiar, numbing sameness of every night that came before. The fire guttering in the pit spits out more smoke than heat. You feel the chill settle in your bones, in your teeth, behind your eyes, the tired ache that sleep will never fully erase. Around you, the others drift into their own routines, patching leaks in the roof with shreds of hide, scraping the last bits of food from cold bowls, whispering half hearted stories to children who are already halfway to sleep. You sit alone for a moment, pretending to read the future in the dying flames. There is nothing there, of course, no visions, no answers, just the dance of shadows that always look the same after a day spent in mud and hunger. You are expected to say something wise, to find meaning in the patterns, but the only thing you see is another night to be endured, another morning lurking on the far side of darkness, promising nothing but repetition. Sleep does not come quickly. Your body is as tired as ever, but your mind stirs with all the tiny worries that crowd every night. Will the food last? Will the weather turn? Will the coughing get worse? Whose footsteps will go unheard tomorrow? You roll these questions around in your head, knowing that answers are as rare as mercy. You stare up at the patched ceiling, counting the cracks, listening to the wind claw at the edges of the hut, waiting for your thoughts to dissolve into that gray, restless half dream that passes for rest here. In the other huts, you hear the familiar noises, the soft coughs, the creak of someone shifting on a pile of reeds, the whimper of a child who has already learned not to expect comfort. Sometimes a distant argument breaks out, a snap of voices, quickly swallowed by the night. The darkness outside is absolute, thick with the smell of damp earth and old smoke, heavy with the threat of unseen things that do not care if you are tired or afraid or already halfway gone. You try to remind yourself that you are the seer, the guide, the one who knows the rituals that keep the world from falling apart. But tonight, as on so many nights, you feel more like a ghost among ghosts, propping up old habits for the sake of others who cannot afford to lose even that small illusion. You whisper a prayer to spirits you do not believe in, not because you hope they will answer, but because the habit is as much a shield as your patched cloak or the embers in the fire pit. There is no sense of safety, only the fragile inertia of bodies too tired to move and minds too drained to worry any harder. Tomorrow will be the same, another day of work, hunger, disappointment, and the rituals that do nothing but fill the silence. The seasons will grind forward, the mud will rise and fall, the losses will keep piling up. You will tell the same stories, perform the same ceremonies, give the same tired reassurances to the same desperate faces. You wonder, Not for the first time, how long this can last, how many days you can string together, each indistinguishable from the last, before you forget that anything else is even possible. The legends have faded, the hope has drained away, and even fear has lost its edge, worn smooth by endless repetition. All that is left is habit, waking, working, worrying, sleeping, repeating. Existence has become a long, slow shrug. Still, there is a kind of stubbornness in your camp, a refusal to vanish quietly. Each night, someone manages to laugh even if it is bitter and short. Someone tells a story. Someone mends a broken tool. Someone finds a moment of comfort in a touch or a word. You cling to these scraps, not because you think they will save you, but because they are all that is left. Eventually, exhaustion pulls you down. You curl up in your threadbare cloak, knees to chest, the cold pressing in on all sides. You hear the wind die down, replaced by the soft, even breathing of those around you. For a moment, you let yourself drift, neither hopeful nor hopeless, just suspended between the day that has ended and the day that will begin. Tomorrow will come, and you will rise, and the world will go on with or without your belief. In the morning, you will get up, as you always do, and step into the mud. You will perform your rituals, tell your lies, endure the silence. Another hopeless day will begin, and you will survive it, because that is what you do.